It was an absurd decree that sent the estate into a frenzy. The Duke of Westmoreland, wealthy and merciless, demanded the ugliest maid in England to serve him. He thought he was buying peace from vain women. He never expected the filthy girl he chose to be his utter undoing. The sprawling, mist-shrouded estate of Highbridge Manor had stood in Devonshire for 3 centuries, a fortress of stone and secrets. In the autumn of 1884, it welcomed back its master, Nathaniel Harrington, the Duke of Westmoreland. Nathaniel was a man hardened by years abroad, and a bitter betrayal by the London aristocracy. He had returned to his ancestral home with a fierce disdain for the calculating powdered debutantes who saw him only as a title and a limitless treasury. On his 3rd morning back, Nathaniel summoned his formidable housekeeper, Mrs. Agatha Higgins, into his mahogany-panelled study. "I require a personal attendant, Mrs. Higgins," Nathaniel announced, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that brokered no argument. "Someone to tend to my study, manage my correspondence, and serve my meals in private." "Of course, Your Grace," Mrs. Higgins replied mentally, calculating which of her most poised, well-mannered girls would suit the role. "I shall send up Mary, or perhaps little—" "No," Nathaniel interrupted, his piercing grey eyes locking onto hers. "You misunderstand me. I do not want a pretty simpering girl batting her eyelashes every time I ask for a ledger. I want no vanity in my quarters, no flirtations. Bring me the ugliest maid in the county. Find me a creature so entirely unappealing that I might forget she is even in the room." Mrs. Higgins blanched her hands, trembling as they clutched her apron. The ugliest, Your Grace." "You heard me. Line them up in the courtyard tomorrow at dawn." Down in the soot-stained bowels of the manor's kitchens, the news of the Duke's bizarre request sparked a flurry of terrified whispers. Among the scullery maids scrubbing cast-iron pots was a girl known only as Gwen. To the rest of the staff, Gwen was a tragic, pitiful sight. She walked with a pronounced, dragging limp. Her posture was perpetually hunched, her hair a matted, oily bird's nest of dull brown, and her face was marred by a heavy dusting of ash and a grotesque waxy scar that stretched from her cheekbone to her jawline. She spoke in a raspy whisper and kept her eyes firmly glued to the floorboards. But Gwen was a ghost of a woman who had once been Cameron Montgomery, the sole heiress to the earldom of Somerset. Just a year prior, Cameron's life had been shattered. Her father, Lord Montgomery, had been falsely accused of embezzling from the crown, a grand conspiracy orchestrated by the ruthless Lord Alistair Covington, a man who had sought Cameron's hand and been summarily rejected. When her father died, under deeply suspicious circumstances, in the Tower of London, Alistair's men had come for her. Cameron had fled into the night with nothing but the clothes on her back, plunging into the unforgiving underbelly of working-class England. She quickly learned that her striking symmetrical beauty and sapphire blue eyes were a deadly curse for a woman with no protection. To survive, she buried Cameron Montgomery beneath layers of grime, theatrical wax, and a beggar's rags, transforming herself into the invisible, untouchable Gwen. When dawn broke, a freezing drizzle washed over the cobblestone courtyard of Highbridge Manor. 24 maids stood in a shivering line. Some had deliberately smudged dirt on their noses, hoping the Duke's personal service might bring higher wages, while others wept, terrified of the notoriously harsh master. Gwen stood at the far end, shivering in a threadbare wool shawl. She had applied fresh fireplace soot to her neck and thickened the theatrical wax on her cheek. She had no desire to be noticed by the Duke. She only wanted to remain in the dark, warm scullery, where Alistair Covington's hounds could never track her. The heavy oak doors groaned open. Nathaniel Harrington descended the stone steps wrapped in a heavy riding coat. He walked the line slowly, his expression a mask of cold indifference. He passed by the girls who had faked their plainness easily seeing through their amateur attempts to look unappealing. Then he stopped. He towered over Gwen. She kept her chin tucked tightly to her chest, her matted hair acting as a curtain over her features. Nathaniel studied her twisted posture, the horrific raised scar on her cheek, the grimminess of her hands, and the oversized moth-eaten cap pulled low over her brow. She was a picture of absolute wretchedness. "Look at me," he commanded. Gwen forced a violent tremble into her hands and slowly lifted her head. She squinted her eyes, obscuring their startling blue color, and contorted her mouth into a nervous, lopsided grimace. Nathaniel didn't flinch. He observed her with a clinical detachment. "What is your name?" Gwen Milord," she rasped, mimicking the thick, uneducated brogue of the East End. Nathaniel turned to the hovering housekeeper. "This one. She will do. Have her scrubbed minimally and sent to my study by noon." Gwen's heart plummeted into her stomach. She had been chosen. The invisibility she had so carefully cultivated was about to be tested under the direct, scrutinizing gaze of the most powerful man in Devonshire. Serving the Duke of Westmoreland was a silent, grueling dance. Nathaniel was a man of intense focus and few words. He spent his days poring over architectural drafts, estate ledgers, and thick volumes of history. For the first 2 weeks, Gwen played her part flawlessly. She dragged her left leg when she walked, kept her face turned away from the sunlight, and spoke only in guttural, one-word answers. Yet as the days turned into weeks, the oppressive silence of the study gave way to an unspoken rhythm between them. Nathaniel, despite his harsh reputation, was not a cruel master. He never raised his voice to her, and when she struggled to lift a heavy coal scuttle, he quietly took it from her hands and stoked the fire himself, a deeply unaristocratic gesture that left Gwen utterly stunned. One stormy November evening, the rain lashing against the leaded glass windows, Nathaniel sat at his desk rubbing his temples. He suffered from blinding migraines, a remnant of a carriage accident years ago, and the dim lamplight was clearly agonizing him. "Gwen," he murmured, his eyes squeezed shut. "There is a volume of Cicero on the second shelf. Green leather. Bring it to me." Gwen limped to the bookshelf. Her fingers traced the spines until she found the text. It was in Latin. She brought it to his desk, but as she set it down, he groaned in pain. "I cannot read this script tonight," Nathaniel said, frustration lacing his voice. "Leave it. You are dismissed." Gwen hesitated. The old Cameron, the highly educated daughter of an earl, felt a sudden, dangerous pang of empathy for the suffering man. Without thinking, she reached out and opened the book. Would you like me to read it, Your Grace?" She whispered, her voice accidentally slipping out of its rough brogue and catching the soft, melodic cadence of her true self. Nathaniel's eyes snapped open. He stared at her, his brow furrowing. "You can read." "And in Latin?" Panic seized her throat. She immediately hunched her shoulders tighter and dropped her head. My old master. He was a vicar, my lord. He taught me the letters so I could dust his books proper. I only know a bit of the sounding out." Nathaniel studied her for a long, breathless moment. The shadows cast by the flickering fire danced across her scarred, dirt-streaked face. "Proceed then," he ordered quietly. Gwen cleared her throat and began to read. She intentionally stumbled over a few words, mispronouncing the harder syllables, but as she read Cicero's Meditations on Grief and Stoicism, she lost herself in the text. Her cadence smoothed out. The rich, intelligent timbre of her voice filled the silent room. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, the tension leaving his jaw as he listened to the ugly scullery maid deliver perfect, philosophical Latin. When she finished the chapter, the silence between them was thick, almost electric. "You are a terrible liar, Gwen," Nathaniel finally said, his voice a soft rumble. Gwen froze. Your Grace. No vicar teaches a scullery maid the correct inflection of Roman patrician speeches, he said, rising slowly from his chair. He walked around the desk, his tall frame casting a long shadow over her. Who are you? I am nobody, Your Grace. Just Gwen. She pleaded, backing away until her spine hit the bookshelves. Before Nathaniel could press further, the heavy study doors flew open. Mrs. Higgins stood there, looking profoundly flustered. Your Grace, forgive the intrusion, but Lady Rosalind has arrived from London. She insists on seeing you immediately. Nathaniel's face darkened. Lady Rosalind was Alistair Covington's younger sister, a vicious, calculating woman who had been trying to trap Nathaniel into marriage for years. Tell her I am retired for the evening. It is too late for that, darling. A shrill, arrogant voice echoed from the corridor. Lady Rosalind swept into the room, draped in emerald silk and dripping in diamonds. She stopped in her tracks as she noticed Gwen cowering by the bookshelves. Rosalind's nose wrinkled in profound disgust. Good heavens, Nathaniel! What is that dreadful creature doing in your private study? It smells like an open sewer. She is my attendant, Rosalind, Nathaniel said coldly. And you are trespassing, Rosalind sneered, stepping closer to Gwen. An attendant. She looks like a disease. Rosalind held a steaming cup of tea she had snatched from a servant in the hall. In a flash of casual aristocratic cruelty, she deliberately tilted her wrist. The scalding hot tea splashed directly onto Gwen's face and chest. Gwen let out a muffled cry of pain, stumbling backward. The hot liquid burned her skin, but worse, it began to melt the thick, theatrical wax on her cheek and wash away the layers of soot and ash she had painstakingly applied that morning. Get out! Nathaniel roared at Rosalind, his composure shattering. Oh, please, it was an accident! Rosalind scoffed, rolling her eyes. Ignoring the lady, Nathaniel rushed toward Gwen, who was desperately trying to cover her face with her hands. Let me see, he demanded, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Are you burned? No, don't look! Gwen panicked, turning and fleeing toward the adjoining private washroom. She slammed the door behind her, locking it with trembling fingers. She rushed to the mirror. The hot tea had melted the wax scar completely away. The ash was streaked, revealing the flawless porcelain skin beneath. Her large, brilliant sapphire eyes stared back at her in terror. She was exposed. Outside, Nathaniel pounded on the door. Gwen, open this door immediately. If you are injured, I must call for the physician. I am fine. She cried out frantically, grabbing a towel to wipe her face, hoping to salvage the disguise, but the coarse fabric only wiped away the rest of the grime. Suddenly the lock gave way. With a sharp crack, Nathaniel had kicked the door in. He stood in the doorway, breathing heavily, his eyes scanning the small room until they landed on her. Gwen stood frozen by the wash basin. The hunched posture was gone. The fake scar was gone. The dirt was gone. Her matted hair, loosened from its cap, cascaded in rich, heavy waves of chestnut around her shoulders. Nathaniel froze. The breath left his lungs in a sharp, audible gasp. He stepped into the washroom, his eyes wide, with a mixture of shock, awe, and furious confusion. He looked at the towel stained with black soot and brown wax, and then back up to the breathtaking ethereal woman standing before him. Dear God! Nathaniel whispered, his voice trembling as he stepped closer. Who in the devil are you? Cameron pressed her back against the cold porcelain tiles of the washroom. The damp towel slipped from her trembling fingers, landing softly on the marble floor. There was nowhere left to hide. The heavy wax that had deformed her jaw was gone, the soot washed away, leaving her pale, terrified, and undeniably beautiful. Nathaniel Harrington, the Duke of Westmoreland, stood utterly paralyzed. The wretched, limping creature he had hired to spare himself from vanity had vanished, replaced by a woman whose aristocratic features belonged in the royal courts of Europe, not the soot-stained scullery of Highbridge Manor. Who are you? Nathaniel repeated his voice, dropping from a shout to a dangerous, silken whisper. He stepped closer, his imposing frame blocking the only exit. You are no scullery maid. You are no vicar's servant. Speak. Tears welled in Cameron's striking sapphire eyes, spilling over her dark lashes. The charade was over. If he threw her out, Alistair's men would find her. If he turned her over to the local magistrate, she would hang for her father's alleged treasons. If I tell you the truth, Your Grace, she whispered, her voice trembling, stripping away the coarse accent to reveal her natural refined enunciation, you must promise not to hand me over to the Crown. Please. My life depends upon it. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. He took in her flawless skin, the aristocratic slope of her nose, and the desperate, cornered animal look in her eyes. He reached out his large, calloused hand, gently tracing the spot where the grotesque scar had been. The contrast of his rough thumb against her soft cheek made her breath catch. I am the Duke of Westmoreland, he said firmly. I bow to no magistrate in Devonshire. Tell me your name. Cameron swallowed hard. I am Cameron Montgomery, daughter of the late Earl of Somerset. Nathaniel inhaled sharply. The Earldom of Somerset. The scandal had rocked London society the previous spring. The Earl had been accused of orchestrating a massive embezzlement scheme against the Bank of England and the Crown itself. He had died in Newgate Prison before his trial, and his daughter, the sole heir, had vanished into the night, branded a fugitive and a conspirator. The Somerset heiress. Nathaniel murmured, his mind racing as the puzzle pieces slammed into place. The papers claimed you fled to France. They said you stole the remaining treasury. It was a lie, Cameron cried, stepping forward, her fear replaced by a sudden, fierce indignation. Every word of it was a lie, orchestrated by the man who wanted my father's lands and my hand in marriage. When my father refused him, he forged the banknotes. He paid the witnesses. He murdered my father in his cell and sent his hounds after me. Who? Nathaniel demanded, his fists clenching at his sides. Lord Alistair Covington, she said, spitting the name like poison. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside the study the storm raged on, but inside the washroom the air was entirely devoid of oxygen. Alistair Covington, Lady Rosalind's brother, the very woman who was currently demanding tea in the drawing-room down the hall, had a brother who had destroyed the life of the woman standing before him. Nathaniel's grey eyes grew glacial. He had always despised the Covingtons, a family of venomous social climbers who masked their cruelty with perfumed letters and tailored suits. He looked at Cameron, truly looked at her. He saw the horrific lengths she had gone to in order to survive. She had mutilated her own dignity, scrubbed floors until her hands bled, and lived in constant, agonizing terror. A fierce, unfamiliar, protective rage ignited in Nathaniel's chest. You will remain in these chambers. Nathaniel ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. You will lock this door. You will not answer to anyone but me. Do you understand? Cameron nodded slowly, her heart pounding against her ribs. What are you going to do? I am going to remove a trespasser from my home, he replied coldly. And then, Lady Cameron, we are going to war. Nathaniel strode out of the washroom, pulling the splintered door shut behind him. He walked into the hallway, his face a mask of terrifying composure. Lady Rosalind was waiting in the drawing-room, pacing impatiently, her emerald silk skirts rustling against the Persian rugs. Honestly, Nathaniel, Rosalind huffed as he entered, the dramatic fit over a servant. You would think I had assaulted a duchess. Has the creature been sent back to the kitchens where she belongs? You will pack your trunks, Rosalind. Nathaniel said, his voice terrifyingly calm. You are leaving Highbridge Manor. Tonight. Rosalind stopped, her jaw dropping in sheer outrage. Tonight, in this storm. Nathaniel, you cannot be serious. My brother Alistair is arriving in Exeter tomorrow. I am to meet him. I care not if you meet him in Exeter or in hell. Nathaniel interrupted, stepping into a personal space. His towering presence made her shrink back. If your carriage is not off my estate in 1 hour, I will have the groundskeepers throw you into the mud. Get out! Humiliated and furious, Rosalind fled the room. But as she hurried past Nathaniel's study to gather her things, her sharp eyes caught sight of something on the floor near the washroom. It was the moth-eaten cap the maid had worn, and beside it, a small silver locket that had spilled from the maid's pocket during the commotion. Rosalind snatched it up. She snapped it open. Inside was a miniature portrait of the late Earl of Somerset. Rosalind's blood ran cold, and then a wicked, triumphant smile spread across her painted lips. The ugly maid was the fugitive Somerset heiress. She did not wait for her carriage. Rosalind ordered her driver to brave the treacherous, rain-slicked roads straight to the telegraph office in the city. She sent a frantic, urgent wire to her brother at his London club. The Somerset rat hides in Westmoreland's walls. Bring the hounds. 3 days passed. Inside the secure walls of Nathaniel's private quarters, Cameron lived a surreal existence. She was no longer Gwen the scullery maid. She was dressed in fine silk gowns, summoned from the estate's attics, her chestnut hair brushed until it gleamed. Nathaniel spent every waking hour with her. They pored over her father's ledgers, which she had sewn into the lining of her tattered skirts, before fleeing London. Between the ledgers and Nathaniel's vast network of private investigators, they began to unravel Alistair Covington's intricate web of financial deceit. As they worked late into the nights, huddled over the mahogany desk, the professional distance between the Duke and the fugitive melted away. Nathaniel found himself captivated not just by her breathtaking beauty, but by her razor-sharp intellect, her resilience, and her fierce spirit. Cameron, in turn, saw the man beneath the hardened Duke, a man capable of profound gentleness and unwavering honour. On the third evening, as Nathaniel handed her a glass of sherry, his fingers brushed hers. He did not pull away. "When this is over," Nathaniel said softly, his grey eyes locked onto hers. "When your name is cleared, where will you go, Cameron?" She looked down at their hands. "I have no home, your grace. The Crown seized the Somerset estates. I have nowhere." "You have here," he said, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. He reached up, cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing the spot where the fake scar used to sit. "If you would stay." Before Cameron could answer, the peace of the manor was shattered by the sound of heavy boots marching across the cobblestone courtyard. Shouts echoed through the halls. The heavy oak doors of Highbridge Manor groaned in protest before being forced open. "Stay here," Nathaniel commanded, drawing a heavy revolver from his desk drawer. He strode out to the grand foyer. Standing at the foot of the sweeping staircase was Lord Alistair Covington. He was flanked by Lady Rosalind and 6 armed magistrates bearing the crest of Scotland Yard. "Good evening, Westmoreland," Alistair sneered, waving a piece of parchment in the air. "I apologize for the late intrusion, but I hold a royal warrant, signed by the Chief Magistrate of London. You are harbouring a fugitive of the Crown." "You have no authority here, Covington," Nathaniel replied, standing tall on the landing, looking down at the men with utter contempt. "Turn around and leave my estate before I have you arrested for trespassing." "Arrested?" Alistair laughed sharply. "I think not. My sister saw the Somerset heiress with her own eyes. Hand her over, Nathaniel. The girl is bound for the gallows." "I am right here, Lord Covington." Every eye in the foyer snapped to the top of the stairs. Cameron stepped out of the shadows. She was breathtaking, clad in a deep velvet gown, her head held high. She did not look like a fugitive. She looked like a queen. Alistair's eyes widened with a sickening mixture of lust and hatred. Cameron. The magistrates will place you in irons. It is over." "It is indeed over, Alistair," Nathaniel said, stepping smoothly in front of Cameron, shielding her with his body. He pulled a thick envelope from his coat pocket and tossed it down the stairs. It landed at the feet of the lead magistrate from Scotland Yard. "Inspector, I suggest you open that." The inspector, looking bewildered, picked up the envelope and broke the wax seal. "What is the meaning of this?" Alistair barked. Nathaniel announced, his voice booming through the cavernous hall, "are the original unaltered promissory notes from the Bank of England. They prove unequivocally that the signature of the Earl of Somerset was forged. Furthermore, they trace the embezzled funds directly into the private accounts of Lord Alistair Covington." Alistair went pale. "Lies, forgeries. You cannot believe this arrogant fool, Inspector. There is also a signed confession from your chief clerk," Nathaniel continued mercilessly. "I had my men visit him in London yesterday. He was remarkably eager to save his own neck when faced with the gallows." The inspector quickly scanned the documents, his face hardening. He turned to look at Alistair Covington. "Lord Covington, these documents appear highly incriminating." "You cannot arrest me." Alistair shouted, his composure completely shattering. He pointed a shaking finger at Cameron. "Warrant or no, she is a fugitive. She ran from the law. Arrest her." "You cannot arrest her. Either, Inspector," Nathaniel said, a slow, triumphant smile touching the corners of his mouth. "And why is that, Your Grace?" the inspector asked cautiously. "Because," Nathaniel said, reaching back to take Cameron's hand, pulling her firmly to his side, "a wife cannot be compelled to testify against her own estate, nor can she be seized without her husband's consent. And as of midnight yesterday, by special license granted by the Archbishop of Canterbury, she is no longer Cameron Montgomery." A collective gasp echoed through the foyer. Lady Rosalind swayed on her feet, looking as though she might faint. Nathaniel raised Cameron's hand, revealing the heavy gold and sapphire signet ring of his ancestors resting on her delicate finger. "May I present my wife?" Nathaniel declared, his voice ringing with absolute, unyielding authority. "Her Grace, Cameron Harrington, the Duchess of Westmoreland. Now, Inspector, I suggest you remove this filth from my home." The inspector nodded curtly. He gestured to his men. "Take Lord Covington into custody." "No, get your hands off me." Alistair screamed as the magistrate seized his arms, dragging him, kicking and screaming out the heavy oak doors. Lady Rosalind followed, sobbing hysterically, her dreams of power and vengeance crushed in an instant. As the doors slammed shut, restoring the manor to its quiet grandeur, Nathaniel turned to Cameron. She was trembling, but this time it was not from fear. The heavy burden she had carried for a year had vanished. She was safe. She was vindicated. Nathaniel dropped his revolver onto a side table and pulled her into his arms. He kissed her fiercely, sealing the promise they had made in the quiet shadows of his study. The estate of Highbridge Manor had asked for the ugliest maid in England. Instead, it had found its true duchess, a woman whose beauty was forged in the fires of survival, and whose heart had conquered the darkest of tempests. Did the Duke's brilliant trap leave you completely speechless? Cameron went from a hunted scullery maid to a powerful duchess in the ultimate tale of survival and revenge. If you loved this thrilling historical romance and want more incredible stories of hidden identities, shocking twists and passionate triumphs, hit that like button right now. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow romance lovers and subscribe to our channel for more breathtaking historical dramas every single week.